My parents said they couldn't help with my son's birth because they were flying to Vegas, but now that they need me, I've got plans of my own. Family means showing up when it matters. That's what my mother always told me growing up. Funny how those words sound now. Hi, I'm Lauren. 32, CPA by profession, single mother by circumstance, and apparently the family disappointment according to my parents. Though recently, their tune has changed dramatically. When I went into labor 3 months early with my son Ethan, I called my parents in a panic. The doctor had put me on bed rest for weeks, warning that premature labor was likely. My ex had already disappeared to find himself in Thailand once the pregnancy became too stressful for him. I had no one else. Mom, it's happening. I'm scared. The contractions are 5 minutes apart and I can't drive myself. The pause on the other end of the line still echoes in my mind. Oh honey, you know we've had this Vegas trip planned for months. Non-refundable tickets. Your father's playing in that poker tournament he's been talking about all year. I remember gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Mom, I'm having your grandson. 3 months early. Can't you call an Uber? Or that friend from work, what's her name? Melissa is out of town. Well, I'm sure the hospital has procedures for this sort of thing. They won't just let you deliver alone. I ended up calling 911. The paramedics were kind. One held my hand in the ambulance while I cried, terrified for my baby and myself. Ethan was born weighing just over 3 pounds. He spent his first 6 weeks in the NICU while I recovered from an emergency C-section. My parents sent flowers and a teddy bear from Vegas. They called once they got back, asking for pictures, cooing over how cute he was despite being so tiny and weird looking. Mom mentioned that. Dad had won $2,000 at the tables. They visited exactly once, staying for 45 minutes, uncomfortable with the hospital setting and all the wires connected to their grandson. We're not really baby people, my mother explained. We'll be more involved when he's older and can actually do things. I nodded, numb to their excuses by then. I stopped expecting anything from them. My maternity leave was short, and finding affordable childcare for a medically fragile infant was nearly impossible. I drained my savings, took out loans, and worked remotely whenever possible, falling asleep at my laptop most nights after feeding Ethan, when he finally gained enough weight and his lungs were strong enough. I created a routine for us. I found a wonderful home daycare run by a retired nurse who specialized in preemies. I took on extra accounting clients on weekends to make ends meet. My parents occasionally asked how we were doing in brief phone calls but never offered to help. You chose to be a single mother, my father reminded me during one conversation. We raised you to be independent. Funny how independence somehow meant alone. Ethan thrived despite everything. He's 2 now, curious and bright, with a smile that lights up rooms. I've built a life for us that's stable, if not extravagant. My apartment is small, but in a safe neighborhood with good schools. I've even managed to start putting away a little for his college fund. Last month I received an unexpected call from my mother. Her voice was different, softer, with an unusual warmth. Lauren, sweetie, how are you and little Ethan doing? The hair on the back of my neck stood up immediately. In 20 years, my mother had never called me sweetie. We're fine. What's going on? Can't a mother just check in on her daughter and grandson? Sure, but you usually text once a month and call on birthdays. She laughed, a high, nervous sound I didn't recognize. Well, we've been thinking about family a lot lately. Your father and I feel terrible that we haven't been more present in Ethan's life. We want to change that. I shifted the phone to my other ear, watching Ethan stack blocks on the living room floor. What brought this on? Does there have to be a reason? We're getting older, and family becomes more important. There was definitely a reason. My mother doesn't have epiphanies about family bonds at random. 3 days later, my father called. This was even more unusual. He typically lets my mother handle family communications. Lauren, your mother and I would like to come visit next weekend. Spend some quality time with our grandson. He has swimming lessons on Saturday morning, but we're free after that. Actually, we were thinking we could stay with you for a few days. Really get to know the little guy. I nearly dropped the phone. In 2 years, they had visited exactly twice, both times staying at a hotel and limiting their interaction with Ethan to a single afternoon. Dad, my apartment only has 2 bedrooms. I don't have anywhere for you to sleep. We can take your room. You can bunk with Ethan. I closed my eyes, counting to 5 silently. I have clients all next week. I can't entertain you during the day. We don't need entertaining. We want to help. Maybe we could watch Ethan while you work. Now I knew something was definitely wrong. My father had once referred to childcare as glorified babysitting that any teenager could do. Dad, what's really going on? He sighed, and I could picture him removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose, his tell when he's about to reluctantly tell the truth. So your mother wanted to approach this delicately, but I'll be straight with you. We've hit a rough patch. Financial rough patch? The housing market took a downturn right when we were trying to sell the house. And there were some investments that didn't pan out. Nothing serious, he added quickly, just temporary cash flow issues. The house they'd lived in for 30 years. The house I grew up in. The house they had repeatedly told me would be my inheritance someday. How temporary? 6 months, maybe a year at most? We've got a buyer, but they can't close until their own house sells. Meanwhile, we've already purchased the condo in Arizona. The retirement condo they'd been talking about for years. The one in the golf community with the reasonable $800 monthly HOA fee. So you need a place to stay, just until the house sells. We thought it would be nice for Ethan to have his grandparents around. I looked at my son, happily playing, unaware of the manipulation unfolding. Dad, I can't fit 2 more people in this apartment for months. It's barely big enough for us. We wouldn't be in the way. Your mother could help with Ethan. I could cook, I've always been good in the kitchen. My father has made exactly 3 meals in his life. Overcooked spaghetti, burned grilled cheese, and something he called bachelor chow that consisted of canned chili mixed with macaroni and cheese. Where's all your furniture going? In storage. Another expense we could avoid if we had, say, a garage to use. I don't have a garage. What about Aunt Carol? My mother's sister had a 5-bedroom house in Connecticut. Your aunt is ... difficult. You know how she and your mother get along. Translation. Aunt Carol would say no, and they knew I was an easier target. I need to think about this, Dad. Of course, but we would need to know by the end of the week. The house closes on the 30th. After we hung up, I sat on my couch, watching Ethan play, trying to process what had just happened. My parents, who couldn't be bothered to drive me to the hospital when I was in premature labor, who had visited their grandson exactly twice in 2 years, now wanted to move in with us temporarily because they had mismanaged their finances. The next day, I called my cousin Jennifer, who stays in closer contact with the family than I do. Oh yeah, she said when I explained the situation. Uncle Robert made some bad investments. Aunt Diane told Mom they lost almost half their retirement fund. Half? Dad made it sound like a minor setback. From what Mom said, they put a bunch of money into some cryptocurrency thing that collapsed. Then they bought the Arizona condo before selling the house, assuming it would sell quickly. Now they're carrying 2 mortgages. The picture became clearer. They were desperate and saw me, or more accurately, my apartment, as a free solution to their problems. That evening my mother texted, thinking about what to bring for Ethan. Does he like puzzles? Wooden blocks? He already has both, I thought, but you'd know that if you'd visited more than twice. I didn't respond. 2 days later my father called again. Lauren, we need to know about the living arrangement. The movers are coming next week. I've been thinking about it, Dad, and I just don't think it would work. My apartment is too small for 4 people. It would only be for a few months. You said possibly a year. Well, worst case scenario. But family helps family, Lauren. There it was, the guilt trip. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Dad, do you remember when I went into labor with Ethan? A pause. Of course. And do you remember what you and Mom were doing? Another pause, longer this time. We had that trip to Vegas, the non-refundable trip. The poker tournament that was more important than your daughter giving birth to your grandson 3 months prematurely. That's not fair, Lauren. That was different. How was it different, Dad? Please explain to me how your poker tournament was an emergency, but you losing half your retirement fund and needing a place to live isn't. We made a mistake, okay? We're trying to make it right now. No. You're trying to use me because you have no other options. That's a terrible thing to say to your father, is it? Because it seems like I only matter when you need something from me. He sighed heavily. What do you want from us, Lauren? An apology? Fine. We're sorry we weren't there when Ethan was born. We should have been. We know that now. Too little, too late. But I wasn't interested in apologies at this point. I have a proposal, I said calmly. I've been looking into larger apartments. There's a 3-bedroom in my building that just became available. If I take it, you and Mom could have the extra room. That sounds reasonable, he said cautiously. The rent is $2,400 a month. I currently pay $1,600, so your share would be $800 a month plus 1/3 of the utilities. $800? Lauren, we're trying to conserve money right now, and I've been conserving money since Ethan was born. This is the only way it would work. We're your parents. You can't charge us rent. Actually, I can. Those are my terms. $800 a month, help with Ethan's care on a regular schedule that we agree to in advance, and a defined move-out date. 6 months maximum. This is ridiculous. We would be doing you a favor helping with Ethan like you helped when he was born, or during his 6 weeks in the NICU, or his first Christmas, or his first birthday. Silence on the other end of the line. Those are my terms, Dad. Take them or leave them. We'll get back to you, he said coldly, and hung up. I knew they wouldn't take the offer. They wanted a free ride, not a fair arrangement. And honestly, I didn't want them here anyway. But I needed to establish that I wouldn't be manipulated or taken advantage of. 2 days later, my mother called. Your father and I have discussed your proposal, she said, pronouncing the word like it was distasteful. We've decided to stay with your Aunt Carol instead, apparently. Aunt Carol wasn't so difficult after all when the alternative was paying rent. That's probably for the best, I replied. I hope you realize how hurtful this has been. After everything we've done for you, I almost laughed. What exactly have you done for me in the last 3 years, Mom? We raised you. We put you through college and I'm grateful for that. But that doesn't entitle you to free housing now. Family helps family, Lauren. Remember that when you're in need someday. The irony was so thick I could hardly breathe. So I was in need, Mom, when Ethan was being born. When I was alone in the NICU, terrified he might not survive. When I had to go back to work 6 weeks after a C-section because I couldn't afford more time off. Where was family helps family then? That's ancient history. You need to let it go. It was 2 years ago. Well, we're trying to make it right now, and you're throwing it back in our faces. I realized then that there was no point in continuing this conversation. My parents lived in a reality where they were always the heroes of this story. Facts be damned. I hope you and Dad work things out. Give Aunt Carol my best. After we hung up, I sat down at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. As a CPA, I've helped many clients navigate financial difficulties. I know how to read between the lines, how to spot patterns in spending and saving, how to identify potential tax issues. My father had mentioned investments that didn't pan out. My cousin had said cryptocurrency. If they had indeed lost half their retirement fund, there would be financial and potentially tax implications. And if my father had been dabbling in crypto without properly reporting gains or losses, I pulled up the IRS website and began researching cryptocurrency tax regulations. Then I opened a new spreadsheet and started making notes. My parents had made it clear that family loyalty only went one way in their book. They expected support, but gave none in return. Fine. If that's how they wanted it, I could play by those rules too. They'd need help navigating their financial mess, and I was uniquely qualified to offer guidance. But my assistance would come with conditions they weren't expecting. If they thought they could manipulate me now, they had no idea what was coming. After all, I'm a CPA who specializes in tax law. And I've spent 2 years learning how to function on minimal sleep while managing complex situations under extreme pressure. Their financial crisis had just begun, and so had my plans. 3 weeks after my parents' desperate attempt to move in with me, I received a text from my mother. Need tax help. Your father made a mess of things. Professional rates too high. Family discount? I stared at my phone, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Of course. They couldn't stay with me for free, so now they wanted free tax advice instead. The audacity was almost impressive. I waited a full day before responding. My regular client rate is $150 hour. Family rate is $100 hour. Her reply was immediate. That's what you charge, family? We're not clients. Professional services require professional compensation, I texted back. I can recommend some cheaper alternatives if you prefer. No response for 2 hours. Then, your father says fine. When can we send paperwork? I smiled to myself. The fact that they agreed so quickly told me their situation was worse than they'd admitted. My father, the man who once spent 3 hours arguing with a cashier over a $5 coupon, had accepted my rate without significant pushback. The next day, a large envelope arrived via priority mail. I waited until Ethan was asleep before opening it at my kitchen table. The financial disaster inside was even worse than I'd imagined. My father had indeed invested heavily in cryptocurrency, just established ones like Bitcoin, but obscure altcoins with names that sounded like they were invented by a 12-year-old. Gamer, Moonrocket, Dogemaster, Quantum Quasar. He'd made significant gains in 2023 over $120,000, but hadn't reported them on their tax return. Then in early 2024, he'd reinvested everything, plus an additional $200,000 from their retirement account, into a new coin called Phoenix Rise that had subsequently crashed to near worthlessness. The unreported gains alone could trigger significant penalties and interest. But there was more. They had purchased the Arizona condo for $450,000 with only 10% down, assuming they'd pay off a large portion when their house sold. But their house, listed at $675,000, wasn't selling. They'd rejected an offer for $625,000 as insulting, and now the market had cooled significantly. They were carrying 2 mortgages totaling nearly $6,000 a month, plus the $800 HOA fee on the condo. My father's retirement income and my mother's part-time job brought in about $7,200 monthly before taxes. They were drowning. There were also questionable deductions on their previous tax returns. My father had apparently been writing off poker losses as investment research for years. He'd claimed their annual trip to Vegas as a professional development expense because he occasionally played in tournaments. I spread the documents across my table, arranging them chronologically. The picture that emerged was clear. My parents were financial amateurs who thought they were experts, making increasingly risky decisions to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford. Their situation wasn't completely hopeless. The house would eventually sell, though likely for less than they hoped. They could potentially recover some of their losses through proper tax strategies. But they needed professional help, not just with their taxes, but with their entire financial approach. I could help them. I should help them. They were my parents after all. But as I looked at the photo of Ethan on my refrigerator, I remembered calling them from the hospital, terrified and alone. I remembered their flowers and brief visit, their excuses and absence. I opened my laptop and began a new document titled Financial Reconstruction Plan, but this plan would come with conditions. The next morning, I called my father. "I've reviewed your documents," I said after minimal pleasantries. "And how bad is it?" He sounded genuinely worried. "It's significant, but not irreparable. I can help you navigate this, but I have conditions." "Conditions?" "Lauren, we're paying your rate. This goes beyond standard tax preparation. You need comprehensive financial restructuring and tax remediation. I'd normally charge at least $5,000 for this level of work." Silence on the other end of the line. "But I'm willing to do it for $2,500, paid in installments if necessary, plus some non-monetary conditions." "What kind of conditions?" His voice was wary. "First, I need complete transparency. No more hidden investments or accounts. Second, you and Mom will attend financial counseling. I'll find someone affordable. Third, you'll agree to a realistic budget that I'll help create." "That seems reasonable," he said cautiously. "What else?" "Finally, I want you both to commit to being present in Ethan's life. Real presence, not just when it's convenient. Weekly video calls, monthly visits. You come to us, not the other way around. Birthday and Christmas presents that show you actually know him. If you miss major events without legitimate emergencies, our financial arrangement ends. You're ... It's using your help as leverage to force us to be grandparents? I'm establishing boundaries and expectations. You've demonstrated that you only reach out when you need something. I'm making sure Ethan doesn't experience the same conditional relationship I've had with you." Another long silence. "Need to discuss this with your mother." "Of course. Let me know by tomorrow. I'll need to get started immediately if I'm going to help mitigate some of these tax issues." After we hung up, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt guilty for essentially blackmailing my parents into being present grandparents, but a larger part felt empowered. For the first time, I was setting the terms of our relationship rather than accepting whatever scraps of attention they deigned to offer. My phone rang 30 minutes later. My mother. "Your father told me about your ... proposal," she began, her voice tight. "I think you're being unreasonable." I'm offering professional services at a significant discount while also trying to ensure my son has a relationship with his grandparents. Which part is unreasonable? Part where you're forcing us into some kind of visitation schedule like we're divorced parents? I'm asking for consistency and commitment. Mom. Ethan deserves that. We're busy people, Lauren. We can't just drop everything to visit whenever you want. I'm not asking for whenever. I'm asking for once a month. 4 hours of your time. 12 days a year. And if we can't make it 1 month, you'll let your father go to prison for tax fraud? I nearly choked. Prison? That's dramatic even for you. He didn't report all that crypto money. That's illegal. It's a problem, yes, but one that can be addressed with proper amendments and payment plans. No one's going to prison unless you ignore it entirely. She sighed heavily. We can't afford your fee right now. I'm willing to accept payments over 6 months. Another sigh. Fine. We agree to your terms, but I want it noted that I think you're being manipulative. I almost laughed at the irony. Noted. I'll draw up a formal agreement and send it over tomorrow. Over the next 2 weeks. I spent my evenings after Ethan went to bed working on my parents' financial situation. I prepared amended tax returns for the previous 3 years, documenting the cryptocurrency gains and losses properly. I created a payment plan proposal for the IRS that would allow them to address their tax liability over time. I also drafted a realistic budget based on their actual income, not the lifestyle they wish to maintain. It included selling their barely used second car, canceling country club memberships, and significantly reducing their dining out expenses. The budget was austere, but manageable. Finally, I compiled information on their housing options. They needed to accept the reality that their house wouldn't sell for their asking price in the current market. They could either reduce the price significantly or consider renting it out to cover the mortgage until the market improved. When everything was prepared, I scheduled a video call with both of them to present my findings and recommendations. My father looked pale as I walked through the amended tax returns, showing a total liability of nearly $40,000 including penalties and interest. $40,000? He repeated, stunned. We don't have that kind of money. That's why I've prepared this installment agreement request. The IRS will likely accept monthly payments of around $800. $800 a month? My mother put her hand to her chest. On top of our mortgages? Which brings me to your budget. I shared my screen, showing the spreadsheet I'd created. You need to reduce your expenses by approximately $3,200 per month to make this work. I walked them through each category. Selling the second car would save $450 in payments, plus insurance and gas. Canceling the country club membership would save $650. Limiting restaurants to once a week would save approximately $800. This is ... drastic, my mother said, her voice small. It's reality, I replied firmly. You've been living beyond your means for years, and now it's caught up to you. These changes aren't punitive. They're necessary. My father nodded slowly. He seemed to be processing everything more realistically than my mother. And what about the house? He asked. You have 3 viable options. I displayed another slide. 1. Reduce the price to $595,000 and accept the first reasonable offer. You'll take a loss compared to your expectations, but you'll stop bleeding money on 2 mortgages. 2. Rent it out. Current rental rates in your area could cover most of the mortgage. 3. Move back in and sell or rent the condo instead. Move back? My mother looked horrified. After we've already moved everything to Arizona? The condo is smaller and would be easier to rent out, I pointed out. And the housing market in Arizona is more active than where your house is located. They looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations long married couples perfect. We'll think about it, my father finally said. Don't think too long. Every month with 2 mortgages costs you about $6,000. After discussing a few more details, I brought up the final item on my agenda. Now, regarding our agreement about Ethan, my mother shifted uncomfortably. Yes, we remember. I've created a calendar for the next 6 months. I displayed a simple schedule showing video call dates and in-person visits. I've already marked holidays and Ethan's birthday. The other dates are flexible if you need to adjust them, as long as we maintain the weekly calls and monthly visits. This feels very structured, my mother complained. Structure creates reliability. Reliability creates trust. Right now, we need to rebuild trust. My father studied the calendar and nodded. It's fair. We'll make it work. To my surprise, they kept their word, initially at least. They called every Sunday evening for a video chat with Ethan. The first few conversations were awkward. My parents asking generic questions and Ethan being providing minimal responses or wandering away from the screen. But by the fourth call, they had figured out that Ethan loved when they made silly faces or sang songs. My father, who I'd rarely seen be playful, started bringing props to their calls: hats, glasses, puppets. Ethan would laugh and engage, sometimes bringing his own toys to show them. Their first in-person visit was stilted. They arrived with an enormous stuffed giraffe that barely fit through my apartment door. Nice gesture, but completely impractical for our small space. They seemed uncertain how to interact with Ethan beyond basic questions and comments about how much he'd grown. But by the end of their 4-hour visit, my father was on the floor helping Ethan build a block tower while my mother had read 3 books to him. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Meanwhile, their financial situation began to stabilize. They accepted an offer on their house for $605,000 less than they'd hoped, but enough to significantly reduce their debt. They implemented most of my budgetary recommendations, though my mother still complained about giving up her weekly salon appointments. The amended tax returns were filed, and the IRS accepted their installment agreement. They weren't out of the woods yet, but they could see a path forward. Things were going surprisingly well. Too well, perhaps. I should have known it wouldn't last. The first sign of trouble came about 3 months into our arrangement. My mother called to cancel their upcoming visit. Your father has a golf tournament that weekend. We completely forgot when we agreed to your schedule. A tournament? I echoed. I thought you canceled the country club membership. A pause. We did. This is at a public course. Something felt off, but I decided not to press. Fine. Can you come the following weekend instead? Actually, we're tied up then too. Friend's anniversary party. How about in 3 weeks? That would be 6 weeks between visits, Mom. Our agreement says monthly. Don't be so rigid, Lauren. Sometimes things come up. I took a deep breath. The agreement was your commitment to consistency. Ethan is starting to look forward to your visits, and we'll be there in 3 weeks. He's 2. He barely knows what day it is. After we hung up, I checked their social media. My mother had recently posted photos of a ladies' luncheon at their former country club. Either they hadn't canceled their membership as agreed, or they were being hosted by friends. Either way, they clearly hadn't embraced the austerity measures I'd recommended. I called my cousin Jennifer again. Hey, do you know if my parents are still members at Sycamore Hills? As far as I know. Mom mentioned seeing Aunt Diane there last week. Why? Just curious. They were thinking of canceling to save money, while Uncle Robert was complaining about the dues increase at the family barbecue last weekend. Said it was highway robbery, but he wasn't giving up his tea times. Family barbecue? They'd told me they couldn't visit Ethan because they were helping a neighbor move that weekend. The lies were adding up. I decided to do some deeper investigation. As their accountant, I had access to their financial records. I logged into their bank account with the credentials they'd provided and reviewed their recent transactions. Country club dues, $650, paid 3 days ago. Dinner at La Bistro, $187 last week. Canyon Ranch Spa, $340, 2 weeks ago. Flight to Las Vegas, $412 times 2 for next month. Las Vegas. They were going to Vegas again. I checked their credit card statements next. Multiple retail purchases at high-end stores. A $2,000 charge to a jewelry boutique. A $3,500 payment to a travel agency labeled Mediterranean Cruise Deposit. They weren't just ignoring my budget recommendations. They were actively increasing their spending while claiming financial hardship. I leaned back in my chair, anger building in my chest. They had agreed to my terms, accepted my professional help at a reduced rate, and then completely disregarded my advice while also breaking their commitment to Ethan. It was time to implement phase 2 of my plan. The next morning, I sent them an email with the subject line, "Termination of Services and Agreement Violation Notice," in professional language. I explained that I was aware they had not followed the financial plan we agreed upon. I outlined specific violations: maintaining club memberships, excessive discretionary spending, and planning expensive travel. I also noted their failure to maintain the visitation schedule with Ethan. As a result, I was terminating our professional arrangement. My services would cease immediately, and the remainder of my fee was due within 30 days. Additionally, I would no longer be available to assist with IRS correspondence or financial planning. I ended with, "As you proceed without my professional guidance, I strongly advise you to retain another accountant immediately to avoid further tax complications. Please do not contact me regarding professional matters going forward." I also attached screenshots of their recent transactions and social media posts as evidence of their violations. My phone rang less than 10 minutes after I sent the email. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. Text messages began flooding in. "Mom, call me immediately. Dad, this is a misunderstanding. Let's talk. Mom, you can't just abandon us with the IRS. Dad, the Vegas trip is for medical reasons. Your mother has a specialist appointment." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I forwarded all my work on their case to my email and deleted the files from my computer. I then blocked their numbers on my phone. They showed up at my apartment the next day. I refused to open the door. "Lauren, this is ridiculous." My father's muffled voice came through the door. "We need to talk about this." "I have nothing to say," I called back. "All communication should be in writing from now on. We're your parents. You can't treat us this way. Please leave before I call building security." I heard my mother's tearful voice. "Can we at least see Ethan? We brought him a present. Ethan is at daycare. Please leave." After several more minutes of pleading and demanding, they finally left. I watched from my window as they got into their car, the luxury SUV they supposedly were going to sell as part of the budget plan. That evening, I received an email from my father. Lauren, Your mother and I are deeply hurt by your actions. While we admit we haven't followed your financial plan to the letter, your response is extreme and vindictive. The Vegas trip is for a medical consultation for your mother's knee. The cruise was a gift from friends for our anniversary. We're not paying for it. As for visits with Ethan. We've maintained regular video calls and have only missed one visit, which we offered to reschedule. Your rigid enforcement of our agreement shows a lack of understanding about how family relationships actually work. We expect you to reconsider your decision and resume your professional services immediately. We've already paid you $1,500 of your fee, and we expect you to fulfill your obligations. Your father. I drafted several angry responses but deleted them all. Instead, I waited until morning and replied with a single paragraph. I have fulfilled all professional obligations as agreed upon until the point when you violated our arrangement. The remaining documentation has been organized and is ready for transfer to your new accountant. Please provide their contact information, and I will forward all necessary files. This is my final communication regarding professional matters. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from an attorney. My parents were threatening to sue me for abandonment of professional duties and emotional distress. I read the letter twice, then laughed out loud. The threats were empty. They had documented everything meticulously, including their agreement to my terms and their subsequent violations. They had no case. But the fact that they would go to these lengths rather than simply taking responsibility for their actions confirmed that I'd made the right decision. They weren't interested in changing. They just wanted to continue using me as their financial safety net while living beyond their means. I forwarded the letter to a lawyer friend for review. She confirmed what I already knew. Their claims had no merit. She offered to draft a response for a minimal fee. Her letter was masterfully crafted, outlining my professional conduct, documenting their breaches of our agreement, and ending with a pointed reminder that pursuing legal action would likely require discovery of their financial records that contained evidence of tax issues that might interest the IRS even further. We received no further legal threats. Over the next few weeks, my parents tried different approaches. My mother sent tearful emails about how they were struggling without my help. My father attempted to go through mutual acquaintances to convince me to reconsider. I maintained my position. I would not provide professional services to clients who disregarded my advice and broke our agreements, family or not. Then came the social media campaign. My mother began posting vague but pointed comments about ungrateful children and the pain of family estrangement. She shared articles about toxic family dynamics, always with a comment about how some people use children as weapons against grandparents. Friends and distant relatives started reaching out, asking what was happening. I replied with minimal details, simply stating that we were working through some family issues. Meanwhile, I continued building my life with Ethan. I received a promotion at work, found a slightly larger apartment with a small yard, and enrolled Ethan in a highly rated preschool program. We were thriving despite my parents' absence, or perhaps because of it. 6 weeks after our falling out, I received another email from my father. The tone was different this time. Lauren, your mother and I have been doing some serious reflection. The attorney's letter you sent made us realize how badly we've handled this situation, and perhaps our relationship with you in general. We've retained a new accountant as you suggested. We've also started working with a financial advisor who's helping us create a realistic plan moving forward. It's been a difficult adjustment, but we're making progress. More importantly, we've been talking about our role as grandparents. We realize now that our commitment to Ethan should never have been conditional or tied to financial arrangements. We genuinely miss him and we miss you too. We'd like to start over on your terms. No expectations of financial help, no demands for your professional services, just a chance to be better parents and grandparents than we've been so far. Please consider giving us that opportunity. Love. Dad. I read the email several times, looking for the manipulation, the hidden agenda. But it seemed genuine. Still, I'd been fooled before. I waited 3 days before responding. I appreciate your email and the reflection it represents. I'm glad you found professional financial help. As for our personal relationship, I'm willing to consider rebuilding, but slowly and with clear boundaries. If you're interested, we can start with the video call next Sunday just to talk, not to discuss finances or professional matters. Ethan would be welcome to join for part of the call if he wants to. Lauren. The video call was awkward, but civil. My parents looked different somehow, less polished, more authentic. My father had grown a beard, and my mother's hair was its natural gray, rather than the highlighted blonde she'd maintained for decades. They asked about Ethan and my work. They talked about the changes they were making, downsizing to a smaller condo in Arizona, selling luxury items, creating a realistic budget with their new financial advisor. When Ethan joined the call, they engaged with him warmly, asking about his preschool and showing genuine interest in his answers. My father had a puppet ready. He remembered that Ethan loved puppets. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. A start on different terms, my terms. Terms that prioritized consistency, honesty, and genuine connection over convenience and appearance. I wasn't naive enough to believe everything was fixed. Years of patterns don't change overnight. But for the first time, I felt like we might be moving toward a healthier relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation and manipulation. As for their financial situation, that was no longer my problem. I had set boundaries and enforced them. I had shown them and myself that I wouldn't be taken advantage of again. My mother called me privately the next day. I owe you an apology, she said, her voice uncharacteristically humble. Not just for the recent situation, but for not being there when Ethan was born. For not being the mother and grandmother I should have been. I remained silent, letting her continue. Your father and I have been talking a lot about our priorities, about what really matters. Losing half our retirement forced us to face some hard truths about ourselves. We've spent so much time trying to impress people we barely like, while neglecting the people who actually matter. That's ... Insightful, Mom. We're trying to change, Lauren. Really trying. Not just with money, but with everything. I know you probably don't believe that yet, and I don't blame you. But I hope you'll give us a chance to show you over time. I'm willing to see where this goes, I said cautiously. But I need to protect Ethan from inconsistency. I understand. We'll follow whatever schedule works for you. No more canceled visits, no more excuses. As I hung up, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could hold on to my anger and resentment, continuing to punish my parents for past failures. Or I could cautiously move forward. allowing them the opportunity to prove their commitment had changed while maintaining the boundaries I'd established. I decided on the latter. Not for their sake, but for mine and Ethan's. Carrying anger is exhausting, and Ethan deserved the chance to know his grandparents if they proved worthy of that relationship. That evening, as I watched Ethan playing in our small yard, I thought about the financial lessons I would teach him as he grew. Not just about money management and tax strategies, but about the value of boundaries, the importance of keeping commitments, and the courage to stand up for yourself, even against the people who are supposed to love you most. My parents had taught me those lessons too, just not in the way they intended. And now, perhaps, we were all learning something new, that it's never too late to change, but change requires more than words. It requires consistent action, demonstrated over time. The true test was still to come. Would they maintain their new perspective when the immediate crisis had passed? Would they continue to prioritize their relationship with Ethan when it wasn't tied to financial necessity? Only time would tell. But for now, I had reclaimed my power in our relationship. I had my own plans. Plans for a life where Ethan and I thrived, with or without their presence. And that was something they couldn't take away from me. 3 months after our tentative reconciliation, my parents were maintaining their commitments mostly. They called Ethan weekly as promised, and they'd made their monthly visits without cancellations. But something still felt off. During their visits, they would occasionally make comments about their financial hardship and the sacrifices they were making. My mother lamented having to shop at regular department stores instead of her preferred boutiques. My father complained about playing at public golf courses where any random person could join your group. These comments were usually made when Ethan was napping or playing in another room, never directly asking for my help, but clearly fishing for sympathy or offers of assistance. I didn't bite. Then came the email from an unfamiliar address, taxresolutionspecialists@gmail.com. The subject line read, "Regarding Robert and Diane Matthews' tax situation." My parents had apparently hired a tax resolution firm to help with their IRS issues. The email requested that I provide all documentation related to their amended returns and installment agreement, to ensure continuity of representation. I replied with a brief, professional message explaining that I was no longer representing my parents in tax matters and suggesting they contact their previous accountant for the necessary documents. The next day, my father called. "The tax resolution people need your notes and calculations," he said without preamble. "They say the documentation we provided isn't sufficient. I've already transferred all the official documents to your new accountant," I replied. "My personal notes aren't part of that transfer. Lauren, don't be difficult. We're trying to resolve this situation, and I'm maintaining professional boundaries. Dad, my work product remains with me unless specifically included in a client file transfer." He sighed heavily. "The new firm thinks there might be a way to reduce our liability. Something about crypto losses offsetting the unreported gains. But they need your original calculations." I paused. The strategy they were suggesting could be legitimate in certain circumstances, but it could also venture into questionable territory depending on how it was implemented. "Dad, who exactly is this tax resolution firm? What are their credentials?" "They specialize in helping people with IRS problems. They have a high success rate." That doesn't answer my question. Are they CPAs? Tax attorneys? What's their company name? "Tax resolution specialists," he said, as if that explained everything. "They have an office in Phoenix." Warning bells rang in my head. Legitimate tax professionals typically don't operate under generic names like tax resolution specialists or use Gmail accounts for business correspondence. "Dad, I strongly recommend you verify their credentials before proceeding. Ask for their professional license numbers and check with the Arizona Board of Accountancy or Bar Association. They're helping us, Lauren." "Something you refused to do." "I didn't refuse to help. I refused to continue helping when you violated our agreement." "There's a difference. Well, these people don't judge us or impose ridiculous conditions. They just want to solve the problem. For a fee, I'm sure," I said dryly. "How much are they charging you?" A pause. "It's a contingency arrangement. A percentage of what they save us." More warning bells. Contingency fees are generally prohibited in tax practice by both the American Institute of CPAs and IRS regulations, with very limited exceptions. Dad, that arrangement is potentially unethical and may violate professional standards. Please be careful. They're helping us when our own daughter wouldn't. That's all that matters. After we hung up, I did some research. Tax Resolution Specialists wasn't registered as a business entity in Arizona. Their website was a template with stock photos of smiling professionals and generic tax advice. The phone number had a Phoenix area code, but when I reverse searched it, it was associated with multiple different tax relief businesses over the past 5 years. All signs pointed to a potential scam targeting desperate taxpayers. I debated what to do. My parents had made it clear they didn't want my professional help anymore. They were adults who could make their own decisions, even bad ones. But if they were being scammed, they could end up in an even worse financial position and potentially increase their tax liability if they followed questionable advice. I decided to send them one final warning email, detailing the red flags I'd identified and suggesting they consult with a legitimate tax attorney. I included links to resources for finding accredited professionals and warning signs of tax scams from the IRS website. I ended with, "While I am no longer providing you with professional services, I feel ethically obligated to warn you about potential fraud. What you do with this information is entirely your choice." My mother replied the next day, Lauren, "While we appreciate your concern, we've decided to continue working with tax resolution specialists. They understand our situation and have been very supportive. Not everyone has ulterior motives or hidden agendas. Sometimes people just want to help. We've made our monthly visit appointment with Ethan for next Saturday. Please confirm this still works with your schedule. Mom. The subtext was clear. They were rejecting my professional advice while expecting me to maintain our personal arrangement. The old pattern of selective engagement continued. I confirmed the visit time but made a mental note to be vigilant about any financial discussions. I wouldn't allow them to use their time with Ethan as an opportunity to discuss their tax situation or seek free advice. 2 months passed. My parents continued their visits with Ethan, and I maintained a polite but distant relationship with them. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, I received a panicked call from my mother. "Lauren, we need your help immediately." Her voice was shaking. "The IRS has frozen all our accounts. They're saying we committed tax fraud. The tax resolution people aren't answering our calls. Your father is beside himself." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Part of me wanted to say I told you so, but that wouldn't help anyone. "Mom, I need you to calm down and tell me exactly what happened." She explained between sobs that they had received an official notice from the IRS about substantial underreporting of income and fraudulent deductions. The notice mentioned potential criminal charges and included a lien on all their assets. When they tried to access their bank accounts, they discovered everything had been frozen. "What do we do, Lauren? We could go to prison?" "No one's going to prison, Mom. This sounds like a collection action, not a criminal prosecution. I need you to scan and email me the IRS notice right away." 30 minutes later, I was reviewing the document. It was indeed serious. The IRS had determined that my parents had underreported income by over $150,000 and claimed fraudulent deductions totaling $78,000. They had assessed additional taxes, penalties, and interest amounting to nearly $92,000. Tax resolution specialists had apparently filed amended returns with even more aggressive and questionable positions than my father's original misreporting. Instead of resolving the situation, they had made it exponentially worse. I called my parents back. "I've reviewed the notice. This is significant but manageable with proper representation. You need a legitimate tax attorney immediately. We can't afford an attorney. All our money is frozen." "I'll help you find someone who will work with your situation," I assured her. "But I need to be clear about something. I won't be representing you professionally. I'll help you find proper representation and provide moral support. But I won't be your accountant or tax preparer." "But you know our situation better than anyone," she protested. "And that's precisely why I need to maintain professional boundaries. I'm too close to this situation to provide objective advice." After some additional discussion, my parents reluctantly agreed to my terms. I helped them connect with a reputable tax attorney I knew through professional networks. Someone who specialized in IRS disputes and had a strong track record of negotiating successful resolutions. The attorney agreed to take their case with a modest retainer and a payment plan for the remaining fees. I provided all the relevant documentation I had from my earlier work with them, with their written permission. Over the next several weeks, the situation gradually stabilized. The attorney was able to get some of their accounts unfrozen for basic living expenses. He filed the appropriate appeals and began negotiating with the IRS for a settlement. My parents were subdued and humbled. The financial swagger and entitlement that had characterized their behavior for decades seemed to have evaporated in the face of potential financial ruin. One evening about a month into this process, they asked if they could come over after Ethan was asleep to talk. I agreed, curious about what they wanted to discuss. They arrived looking tired and noticeably older. My mother's hair was completely gray now. She had apparently stopped coloring it. My father's posture was less commanding, his expression less certain. "We owe you an apology," my father began once we were seated in my living room. "A real one, not the superficial ones we've offered in the past." I waited, not making it easier for them. "We've been selfish, entitled, and manipulative," he continued. "Not just recently, but throughout your life. We've put our comfort and convenience above your needs. We've treated you as an extension of ourselves rather than as an individual with your own life and priorities. When you needed us most, when Ethan was being born, we chose a vacation over being there for you," my mother added, her voice breaking. "There's no excuse for that. None." "What changed?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Why this realization now?" They exchanged a glance. "Hitting rock bottom has a way of clearing your perspective," my father said quietly. "When everything was frozen, when we realized we might lose everything we had to confront who we really are. And we didn't like what we saw. The attorney you recommended asked us some very direct questions," my mother explained. "About our spending habits, our priorities, our relationship with you. He wasn't just gathering financial information, he was trying to understand how we got into this mess." "And what did you tell him?" I asked. "The truth," my father said simply, "that we've lived beyond our means for decades. That we've prioritized appearances over substance. That we valued a poker tournament over being present for our daughter and grandson." He asked us to reflect on whether our financial problems might be connected to deeper issues, my mother continued. He suggested that our pattern of living beyond our means might reflect a need to appear more successful and important than we felt. "And was he right?" I asked. My father nodded slowly. "I think so. I've spent my whole life trying to prove I was better than my own father, who worked in a factory and never made more than $40,000 a year. I wanted to be seen as successful, prosperous. I wanted everyone to think I had it all figured out. And I enabled it," my mother admitted. "I loved the status, the appearances. I loved telling my friends about our trips, our club memberships, our investments. Even when I knew we were stretching ourselves too thin, I was stunned by their level of self-reflection. This wasn't the superficial remorse they had shown in the past, quickly followed by new demands or expectations. This seemed real. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we rebuild," my father said firmly. "Not just our finances, but our relationships, especially with you and Ethan, if you'll let us. The attorney thinks he can negotiate our liability down to about $50,000, my mother explained. We'll need to sell the Arizona condo, liquidate our remaining investments, and live very modestly for several years. But we can avoid bankruptcy and we're okay with that, my father added, more than okay. It feels liberating in a strange way. No more pretending. No more keeping up appearances. They outlined their plan going forward. They would rent a small apartment in a modest complex not far from me. My father would return to part-time consulting work to supplement their retirement income. My mother had already applied for a position at a local library, something she had always wanted to do but had considered beneath her previously. "We don't expect you to trust us right away," my father said. "We know we need to earn that trust back through consistent actions, not just words. We'd like to maintain our regular visits with Ethan," my mother added. "And perhaps, over time, rebuild our relationship with you too. On your terms, not ours." I studied their faces, looking for signs of the old manipulation, the hidden agenda. But all I saw was exhaustion, humility, and what appeared to be genuine remorse. "I appreciate your honesty," I said finally. "And yes, you can continue your visits with Ethan. As for rebuilding our relationship, that will take time. And consistency." We understand, they said together. Over the following year, my parents demonstrated a remarkable transformation. They moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment and embraced their simplified lifestyle with unexpected grace. My father took on consulting projects that utilized his business experience, while my mother thrived in her part-time library position, eventually being promoted to children's program coordinator. They never missed a visit with Ethan, even when my father had the flu and participated via video call instead. They remembered his preferences, celebrated his milestones, and became genuinely interested in his development as a unique individual. Most surprisingly, they respected my boundaries without complaint or passive-aggressive comments. When I couldn't accommodate an occasional request for schedule changes, they accepted it without making me feel guilty. When they needed assistance with something, they asked directly and accepted no as an answer when necessary. Their financial situation stabilized. The tax attorney negotiated a settlement with the IRS that required significant sacrifice but was manageable. They lived frugally but without the constant complaints about deprivation that had characterized their earlier attempts at budgeting. One day, about 15 months after their financial crisis began, my mother called with an unexpected request. "Lauren, your father and I have been talking. We'd like to start a college fund for Ethan. Nothing extravagant, just $100 a month that we'd put into a 529 plan. Would that be okay with you?" I was touched by the gesture not because of the money itself, which was modest, but because it represented long-term thinking and genuine investment in Ethan's future. "That's very generous," I said sincerely. "I think that would be wonderful. We want to contribute positively to his life," she explained. "Not just with presents or visits, but with something that will matter for his future." That Christmas, instead of the excessive and impractical gifts they had given in the past, sent Ethan with a handmade wooden toy chest that my father had built in a community workshop class he was taking. Inside were a few carefully chosen books and toys that aligned perfectly with Ethan's current interests. For me, they gave a photo album they had compiled, containing pictures of my childhood alongside recent photos of Ethan at similar ages. The thoughtfulness of the gift, the time and personal attention it represented, moved me more than any expensive present could have. As we sat in my living room that Christmas evening, watching Ethan play with his new toys, I reflected on the journey we had taken as a family. My parents' failure to be there for Ethan's birth had been inexcusable. Their subsequent attempts to use me for financial rescue and free housing had been manipulative and self-centered. But people can change when circumstances force them to confront their own failings. Sometimes a complete breakdown is necessary before real growth can occur. My parents weren't perfect. They still occasionally made tone-deaf comments or temporarily slipped into old patterns of thinking. But they caught themselves more quickly now, apologized more sincerely, and worked consistently to be better. "Penny, for your thoughts?" my father asked, noticing my contemplative expression. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," I replied honestly. "How different things are now compared to when Ethan was born." He nodded, his eyes sad. "I'll never forgive myself for not being there that day. For choosing a poker game over one of the most important moments in your life. I've forgiven you," said, surprising myself with the truth of the statement. "Not because what you did was okay, but because holding on to that anger doesn't serve any of us anymore." My mother reached over and squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. "We don't deserve your forgiveness, but we're grateful for it. And we promise to keep working to be worthy of the second chance you've given us." Ethan toddled over then, holding up a book for my father to read. My dad lifted him onto his lap with a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes in a way his smiles rarely had in the past. As I watched them together, my father reading animatedly, my mother joining in with sound effects, Ethan giggling delightedly, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This wasn't the family dynamic I had grown up with. This was something new, something healthier, something built on hard lessons and genuine growth. My parents had said they couldn't help with my son's birth because they were flying to Vegas when they needed me later. I had plans of my own plans that included boundaries, accountability, and consequences. Those plans had worked, though not in the way I had initially expected. Instead of punishing my parents or holding their past actions against them indefinitely, my boundaries had created the space for genuine transformation. By refusing to enable their dysfunction, I had inadvertently given them the opportunity to become better versions of themselves. Now I had new plans. Plans for a future where Ethan would have relationships with grandparents who truly valued him. Plans for healing old wounds and building new, healthier family dynamics. Plans for forgiveness without forgetting the lessons we had all learned. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's standing firm in your own worth until others rise to meet you there. Sometimes it's creating the space for people to face the consequences of their choices and grow from them. Sometimes it's allowing for the possibility of genuine change while protecting yourself from further harm. My parents had failed me when I needed them most. But in that failure and in my response to it, we had all found a path to something better. Not perfect, not without occasional setbacks, but real and honest and sustainable. As I looked around my modest living room at my small but now functional family, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel: gratitude. Not for what had happened, but for where it had led us. Not for the pain, but for the growth that followed. My son would grow up with grandparents who were present, not just physically, but emotionally. He would know them as they truly were, flawed but trying, imperfect but loving. And maybe, just maybe, he would learn from all of us that it's never too late to change, to heal, to become better than you've been before. That was a legacy worth building, one day at a time.